As he was sinking, he heard someone calling him from the surface saying brother, but he was only getting deeper every minute. At a table there were two brothers. The older one repeated that he could die, but still in spite of that he would stay with him. The younger one asked him what true death was like, and he answered that they would never really die. It would just be a long sleep, and at some point they would wake up again. Suddenly the little boy asked his brother if he would eat him at some point, to which he replies with a yes, and that they will both take over the world. His older brother leaves the place saying that it was time. Before he left, the older one told him as a reminder that humanity is never trustworthy, so he should always be very careful. Just before closing the door with his exit, he says goodbye to his brother with "until the next time you wake up." Reflecting with what happened, he decides to go out to look for the little one. After opening the door and passing through a dimensional tunnel, he arrived to what seemed to be a reality where the world was devastated. The sky was red and time seemed to have stopped because everything around him did not move. When he looked at the temple that was in front of him, he saw his brother in the highest part of it. Kangxi was the name of that little boy, who was now nailed with a spear in a temple. He was finishing a game of a video game. Before starting his next game, he noticed that a certain girl named Wenwen had not connected 18 hours ago. Starting to play, he was devising a strategy in his mind, thinking that no one was going to notice his move, and thought it was a sure victory. In that, a girl speaks to him and begins to tell him all the strategy that the boy was doing, and the best thing was to withdraw, since he would never have a chance to beat her, to which he agreed. When he tried to see the girl's profile information, he saw that her information was blank. In another place was the girl who had spoken to him. She says that the game was good but not something special, to which the man who is driving replies that he does not understand why the director wants that guy. A white-haired girl says that this decision is only the director's and should not question it, and that such a person had not appeared in many years. They mention an interview that is set for the next day. The red-haired girl who had played the game thinks that Lai Mingfei is a weird guy, so she wonders why he is on level 5. She quickly connects to Nuoma, which is a virtual dimension, by calling Nuoma, and asks him to provide her with information about Mingfei. He shows her some basic things about his life. Apart from this, he tells her that he has never had many friends and only likes video games, as he can adapt to any environment he is in. He just has no initiative for anything. As an extra plus, he tells her that there is a girl in his class that he likes, and that this one is called Wenwen. Nuoma tells him that in spite of all this, he has one wish in life. When Mingfei leaves the house, he meets an old man in the store who tells him that he has already heard that he will study abroad, to which Mingfei tells him that it is not sure yet. Valma mentions that Mingfei's dream is based on simply watching over the kiosk of the man he was talking to. The boy who was driving the car wonders why they recruit this kind of people, so the white-haired girl tells him that he should first see the results of the interview. In his neighborhood, Mingfei went to look for the letter that the academy sent him, but next to it he also found a package which surprised the boy. But he was even more surprised by what was in the package, which was a telephone. Mingfei, even thinking that he had been rejected even before reading the letter, took this as a gift of condolences. In the letter he was indeed informed that he had been rejected from the university he had applied to, but in the same letter was an invitation to join the Castle Academy, which was an affiliated institute of the Applied University, but first he had to apply to them. The letter also mentioned that Professor Gu would be his tutor. When he turns on his cell phone, he realizes that he has a contact. When he tries to process all this, Mingfei hits himself because he thought it was a dream. At home, when talking to his uncles, they also thought it was some kind of scam, and they even think that he stole the cell phone. In the midst of all this, his cousin appears and says that these affiliated academies that give scholarships are similar to the main universities, but only geniuses like the aforementioned Chu Xinghin can enter them, to which Mingfei could never compare. His uncle's debating about how that could happen. The phone starts ringing for an incoming call. They assume the scam is working. His aunt is the one who answers, but when Mingfei assumes it's all over, she tells him that the person on the phone is informing him that he has an interview the next day at the Regent Hotel. The next morning, Mingfei was already in front of the hotel where he had been summoned for the interview. When he arrived at the waiting room, he met a group of people who for some reason knew his name. When he greeted them, they told him that they were also in that place to present themselves for the interview. Surprised but happy to realize that Wenwen was also there, he approached to talk to him. At that moment, the guy who had been called just 2 minutes ago had left, which was a surprise for Mingfei since the interview had been too fast. When that guy left, the next person was called, and this time it was Wenwen's turn. Mingfei wished him luck, but after a few short minutes she left the room, and when she was about to tell him what they would ask, it was Mingfei's turn to enter. Upon entering the room appears the white-haired girl who introduces herself as Zhu Deyaji, tells him that she will be the examiner. After greeting each other, the interview began, which started in a very strange way. The first thing he was asked was if he believed in extraterrestrials. Mingfei's answer was a very simple one. He agreed that there should be extraterrestrials, but for some reason he decided to say this in English. In response to this, the guy who was there told him that it was not necessary to tell him, so he should say it in his own language. Again, Mingfei was in an internal debate when Zhu continued with the first question, in which he asked him for an explanation of why he believed. Mingfei began to tell him that he sits at night on the roof just looking at the stars, saying that when you find yourself alone with them while you see them, you start to think about how big the universe is and how long it has existed, which would be an eternal mystery for mankind. But it also takes tens of millions of years to reach the planet Earth, adding that it would have to cross many galaxies, and even so, only on Earth can you meet people. The speed of light is less than a second, but it would take millions of years to meet someone in a single second, and this seems strange to Mingfei. The boy who remains in the room asks him if when he indicates the loneliness of the light he is also referring to his own loneliness. Mingfei just answered with a yes. Zhu now followed with the second question, and in this one he asked him if he believed in superpowers. Mingfei did not hesitate for a single second before quickly answering that he completely believed in superpowers. Zhu again asks him why he believes. Mingfei states to him that if you don't have superpowers, you admit that absolutely everything you see in fiction is just made up to fool people. There would no longer be any motivation to survive, saying that the future should not just be getting up early to go to work, pay the mortgage with the salary at the end of the month. The boy who stood by Zhu's side tells him that robust life needs no explanation. Zhu asks him the third question: do you believe that the basis of human existence is only the mind, the spirit, and the soul, or is it still materialistic? Mingfei is paralyzed for a few seconds without being able to say or even think anything, hesitating too much about the interview, and quickly makes the decision to leave the place. After taking his things, he says goodbye to Zhu and the boy, thanking them for the invitation. He just replied that thank you for your interest in the Castle Academy. Mingfei ran out of the place thinking that Wenwen would be waiting for him and they could return home together. At the moment when he was leaving, the red-haired girl was entering the car together with an older man, and she called Zhu and the guy who was there doing the interviews, Yi Sheng. This man asked both of them how the result of the interview was. It was about Professor Gu. Sheng begins to explain to him that Mingfei refrained from continuing, so he probably didn't like it. The professor complains to him why he didn't stop him and demands that he asks him not to leave even if it is necessary to kneel before him. The professor, in search of a solution, chooses to call his parents, to which Sheng interrupts him and tells him that he will make that call. When he arrived home, he was welcomed by his uncles and aunts, telling him that he would go to Anguo. They told him that Professor Gu had called from the Castle Academy and asked them to go to the Lineage Regency Hotel for breakfast the next day. The next morning they were already at the hotel. Professor Gu arrived at the hotel and all of Gu's attention was directed only to Mingfei, welcoming her. Mingfei's aunt told the professor to be straightforward, and the professor replied that as long as he was assigned to the school, he would annually maintain a scholarship of 36,000, convincing Mingfei's aunt. Mingfei asked the teacher directly what he saw in him, and the teacher told him that he was excellent, how he had great potential, and that he was a once-in-a-century young talent, which surprised everyone in the place. The teacher told him that his parents were honorary students of the academy, but also that this was part of a secret. The teacher also gave Mingfei a letter from his parents to the principal. Although Mingfei was a little doubtful, he took the letter, and at that moment the teacher took his arm and told him that his parents really loved him. He clarifies that the headmaster asked him to please give Mingfei his parents' greetings. Mingfei's aunt explains to the teacher that Mingfei was separated from his parents at a very young age and has not seen them since then. In this letter that Mingfei's mother had written, she told the director that the investigation was quite tense and asked him to stay in good shape to see him in the future. Then she began to talk about her son, Lu Mingfei. She told him that he must have already turned 18 and that although he may not be the best person, she is sure that he could make a big difference at the academic level. Along with all that, she asked him to please Castle Academy to help him enroll, ending the letter with a "Mom and Dad love you." Mingfei begins to cry inconsolably until he is interrupted by the red-haired girl, who tells him that she is in the women's restroom. Then the two of them go to the living room together. Here Professor Gu introduces the girl as Nuo and says that she is the most outstanding student of the second year of the academy. The teacher asks Mingfei if she is really interested in admission, to which she simply replies that she has to think about it. Nuo causes a silence from everyone by saying that it is because of the girlfriend, a literary girl who is in the same class as Mingfei, clearly referring to Wenwen, which Mingfei strongly denies. That same night Mingfei was on the roof of his building, wondering who Nuo really is and why he knows so much, but admitting that he wasn't wrong before, since he really did hesitate to accept because of Wenwen. Mingfei almost falls off the building because of the big scare Nuo gave him by appearing behind him asking him why he doesn't tell Wenwen how he really feels. Nuo stops Mingfei from falling off the building, starts telling him that a man declaring his love to his phone is really boring, and tells him that Professor Gu had asked him to convince him to join the academy, noting that he was still hesitating to do so. Mingfei tells him that he thinks he still has a chance with Wenwen, but Nuo completely destroys him by questioning several things about the two of them. While Mingfei was still hesitating, Nuo received a call from the teacher asking him if the boy had already accepted, but Nuo doesn't pay attention to the teacher. Nuo went on to say that to really love someone is not easy, and he says that if he has that conscience and that he must do many things for the person he loves. Nuo asks him if he can really do anything for a girl, to which Mingfei without hesitating a bit replies that yes he can. At this if that was his thought, the Castle Academy would be completely closed to him. After that I just wish him good luck. The next day Mingfei and Wenwen were already in the theater looking at the room that the girl wanted to rent for the party of the literature club. After this Wenwen asked Mingfei to which school he would apply, to what he only said to a local one. When both were leaving the park, calmly in front of them appears Nuo, who tells Wenwen that she is the sister of Mingfei. Wenwen says goodbye to both of them, telling them that she will not take more time, and proceeds to go away from there. Mingfei asks Nuo what he is doing there, to which she ignores his question and tells him that he should get away from Wenwen immediately. Mingfei, rather confused, mentioned to him that the day before he had not said the same thing. Nuo tells him that Professor Gu will be leaving the next morning, so he should make a decision that night what he will do. Mingfei reminds him that the next night he has something very important to do, which is the party. To this Nuo simply tells him that if he waits even one more day he will lose the opportunity to attend the academy. While he was leaving, Nuo mutters that he would lose the opportunity just because of Wenwen, to which Mingfei replies that she is more important than anything else in the world. A few hours later Mingfei was in his bathroom practicing what should be his speech at the party. The next day Mingfei began to make some preparations for the party, and at nightfall he was making sure that everything was in perfect order. At that moment a colleague arrived to tell him to dress a little more formal for Wenwen, and with this he gave him a suit. When he arrived at the theater, Mingfei went on stage remembering everything that Nuo told him 2 nights ago, and when he was ready to declare himself to Wenwen in front of everyone, he was interrupted by his companions. At that moment someone came out from the back of the stage. It was Zhao Menghua, who was declaring his love to Wenwen, who reciprocated without hesitation. Mingfei ecstatic with what was happening, while all the other people in the room were happy and supporting what would now be a new couple. Just at that second the door of the room opened, and the man who had previously helped him with the preparations for the party appeared, and behind him came the person that Mingfei least expected to see. Now appeared, calling him Lijiadu. Nuo arrived with 4 other girls. She was wearing an elegant red dress that looked like a gala, and she tells Mingfei why she was still wasting her time in that place if they had more important things to do. Mingfei asks her surprised why she has not left, to which Nuo answers that if he does not promise to leave with her he cannot leave, and that there are people waiting for him. All this in front of Mingfei's companions, and with this she tells the girls who were next to her to change the boys' clothes. Nuo tells Mingfei's companions that he is sorry, but there is something very important and he must take Lijiadu with him. After Mingfei has changed his clothes, Nuo takes him by the arm and tells him that it is time. While they both leave, leaving everyone else, Nuo tells Mingfei to take a second look, but he tells him that now it is not worth it or necessary, and that from that moment on his eyes will only be on the front, and so they both leave the theater. After stopping for lack of gas, Mingfei asks Nuo why she is so nice to him, and she replies that she is just being nice and nothing more. Nuo tells him that she will be his big sister if he decides to enroll. Determined, Mingfei calls Professor Gu, aware that it will be the final decision to attend the academy. Professor Gu gives him his congratulations as Nuo Ma begins with the enrollment process by giving him her temporary student number and informing him that her rank is S. Nuo Ma introduces herself and welcomes him. Nuo says that by putting on a crown it will be difficult to take it off again. At that a helicopter descends near them. It is shown as Nuo Ma sends a message to a group of people located in different parts of the world, and Nuo Ma says, Lu Mingfei, you are finally back. Already enrolled, Mingfei was in the subway station of the airport looking for the so-called CC line, but there nobody took him seriously. But among all that he found a guy of whom he also made a similar comment. But Mingfei, thinking that this guy was asking him for money, starts to talk to him in other languages to pretend that he doesn't understand him, of which the guy realizes his accent and that he is not a foreigner. He introduces himself as Finger von Frings and tells him that he needs some money to buy something to drink after having lost his wallet, but at this moment he realizes that Mingfei has the castle card, but he doesn't believe him and thinks he is a beggar inventing a lie to get him to give him money, but Finger shows him his card to confirm that he is telling the truth and takes away the little money Mingfei had. When night came, Mingfei asked him what grade he was in and he told him that he was in 8th grade. And as in the academy, Finger explained to him that the hidden routes run irregularly, and since the academy is hidden in the mountains it has no access to the external routes, so the most convenient route is the CC. Mingfei saw that Finger had fallen asleep and then did the same. He began to dream that he was in a war, and then he woke up quite scared, but when he saw himself again in the station, Finger was not there. And then a boy who was sitting on the floor a few meters away from him began to talk to him. And he talks to him about things that Mingfei does not understand. Mingfei tells him that he wants to go to eat something, but the boy insults him and calls him brother. Mingfei wakes up just at the moment when they are calling people to take the CC line train. The security guard who was calling them tells Finger that he hoped not to see him that year. Mingfei arrives and introduces himself to the guard, saying his name, to which the man was stunned and said that he was that famous S-rank guy. Upon hearing that, Finger is also surprised, mentioning that he has the same rank as the director himself, to which they both tell Mingfei that just by swiping his card he would be allowed entry, and the subway would be prepared just for him and he would arrive just in the moment. A little frustrated, he says that he waited so long in vain. When he put his card in the reader, a voice welcomed him, and while all the lights of the station and the whole airport were turned on, it informed that the CC-1000 subway was about to enter the station. When the train arrived, Mingfei was greeted by Professor Gu, who immediately jumped up to embrace him, happy that he had finally decided to attend. Once on the train, he was given his uniform, which had his name embroidered on it. Professor Gu handed him a folder and told him that first of all he had to sign a confidentiality agreement, since nothing about the orientation could be made public. Mingfei, even though he can't understand what the contract says, he signs it. With this, the professor begins to explain to him that although the university degree is also recognized by the Ministry of Education of Anguo, but the circle of education is different, since in Castle the dragons are studied, and at this the professor asks Mingfei what he thinks the dragons are, and he answers that they are the legendary creature. But he couldn't say more than that. Professor Gu begins to tell him that dragons are mysterious creatures in any culture of the world in which everyone fears them, but no one can say exactly what a dragon is. With this, he also exposes why the Castle Academy studies dragons, to destroy them all. Mingfei is shocked by all this information. The professor tells him about dragon kings, heroes, and a legacy that the academy must preserve. Mingfei thinks that Professor Gu is actually a psychopath and Castle Academy is a psychiatric hospital. Mingfei tells Professor Gu that what he probably needs is not a hero but a doctor. In a second, everything around turns black, and when a little light manages to emerge, the only thing Mingfei sees is the boy who had previously spoken to him in what was supposed to be a dream. This little boy tells him that absolutely everything he said is true. Mingfei quickly recognizes him but does not take the situation into account. He assumes that he is also a student of the Castle Academy and innocently asks him how come he didn't see him when he boarded the train, to which the boy answers quite calmly that he boarded with him and tells him that he is also a passenger on his way to the Castle Academy. What you just heard would only be a ghost story, said that little boy coldly, and then tells him to look through the window of the train. When he does so, he finds a mountain on which he sees the static body of a large dragon. The boy welcomes him to what he called the Kingdom of the Dragon. At his sight, the environment begins to look like a history book but animated, while the little boy begins to tell him that the patriarch of the dragons, the Black Dragon King Nidhogg, thousands of years ago had been murdered on his own throne, which is the mountain that always remains covered with ice and snow. When the man who murdered him committed this act, he prostrated his huge corpse right on top of this mountain, and they began to call that day as the first times. He goes on to say that this is the oldest emperor ever recorded, and on the day he died the crowd cheered him, stressing that if it were not for that day the world would not have come to what it is today. Mingfei asks him if he knows this dragon, to which he received as an answer that he does not know him but that he died well, that he really deserved to die. After this, Mingfei woke up in the same room but again with Professor Gu. At that moment, a man arrived with 2 briefcases that were for Professor Gu. This man introduced himself to Mingfei as Fushin Yashi, who congratulated him and said that at last, after 40 long years, a talented new student of S rank had arrived. Professor Gu told Mingfei that they had brought 2 pieces of evidence to prove what he had told him before, which were very high-level artifacts specially borrowed from the ice cellar for him. The professor opens one of the briefcases and shows Mingfei what the scales look like but says that they are not just any scales. He points out that he doesn't have a gun license, but Professor Gu tells him that in this place he doesn't need such a thing. Mingfei fires the gun, but given the pressure of the gun he ends up being pushed backwards and ends up lying on the floor. Mingfei was astonished by the fact that even after hitting the scale it didn't get a single crack. The professor reminded him that it wasn't just any scale, but a dragon scale. Mingfei still didn't believe that it was a dragon scale. He asked if it was some kind of high technology, but Professor Gu told him that he could see the second evidence that this time Yashi unlocked it. This time it was a specimen that was found in the realm of shadows called Yingguo in 1976. Before it could get out of the shell at that time it had been swallowed by a giant python. After that, a farmer in the area had managed to kill the snake which kept the puppy inside. Yashi continues his explanation by saying that dragons are hard to kill, and some species cannot have their souls destroyed. When Mingfei looks at the dragon cub he still doesn't believe that it really is a dragon, but then he is a little shocked because for a second he saw how the little dragon specimen opened its eyes. The teacher asks him what happened to it, and while he answered that he had the momentary impression that it had woken up, the dragon wakes up completely. Both Yashi and the professor were shocked that the dragon woke up at that moment, since his day of awakening should not be that. They both started to say that it was Mingfei's lineage that called him to wake up. When the specimen tried to escape by hitting with his head the flask that kept him locked up, he hit some kind of seal that it had, which put him back to sleep. Yashi affirms that what happened was a miracle, since the dragon should not have been resurrected so early. When the professor turns to Mingfei to flatter him, since he assumes that what happened was thanks to his presence, Professor Gu offers him to take a walk so that he can clear his mind and feel more comfortable in the environment. While they were walking, Mingfei asked the professor if he could leave, and the professor replied that they have to erase his memory, causing him to have to repeat a year to enter a university. Mingfei gave up leaving at that moment and agreed to try the castle system for a few days to see how he felt about it. At that, the professor gives him a philosophical talk and ends with a welcome to the Castle Academy. While Professor Gu and Mingfei were walking around the academy's campus, the former was telling the boy that according to investigations, several heavyweights of the prince class among the dragons have the city of Xingguo as their resting place. And that's why 10 years ago the school began to make the Chinese language course compulsory, since they have the task of going into the interior of Xingguo to kill the Dragon King. As soon as the sirens began to sound throughout the school, Mingfei thought it was a dragon attack. But suddenly, gunshots began to sound throughout the campus, and Professor Gu told him to run and get down on the ground. The young man obviously asked what was going on, and the professor told him that it was the president of the student council named Caesar Gattuso. The professor told Mingfei that he shouldn't be afraid as more soldiers were coming out of the buildings. At this moment, Professor Gu was shot right in the chest. Before falling down, he told Mingfei to please choose his class. Mingfei was disturbed seeing how more and more people fell wounded on the campus. Little by little everyone was falling wounded. There were even snipers. When almost everyone had already fallen, someone spoke to Caesar and asked him how many of them were left, to which he replied that there was only one player, to which he suggested solving things with another method, since they were in the same situation. Both boys met in the middle of the campus square, Caesar carrying his trusty dagger and Ziheng his sword, ready to fight each other. Caesar tells him that his tactics have improved quite a bit, and he didn't expect things to turn out that way. Ziheng says that to have Caesar praise him so much he feels very honored. The two of them were engaged in a fierce battle across the campus, demonstrating their great fighting skills, while Mingfei thought that everything that was going on was a bunch of nonsense, and that the academy was especially questionable. Right in front of him appeared a girl he already knew quite well. It was Nuo, who was carrying a pistol. She approached Mingfei sharply and pointed her gun right at his forehead. But at that moment she ordered him to duck. When he obeyed, he saw that right behind him was a girl who belonged to Ziheng's team. Both girls shot at each other at the same time, but it was Nuo who fell. As he fell next to Mingfei, he told her that he was well behaved but also very slow. Just at that moment, Mingfei's agony exploded when she heard the girl tell her that they had won since Nuo had been killed, and while she told Ziheng that they didn't need to continue. Mingfei, who had taken Nuo's gun, shot the girl right in the head so that she fell as well. She went on to finish off Caesar with a single shot, and then it was Ziheng's turn. Mingfei saw how large groups of nurses came out of the academy buildings, each of them injecting only one dose to all the students and teachers, only Professor Gu, who were down. A teacher also appears on the scene complaining that currently students do not give any priority to their schoolwork, saying that everything is a matter of money. and everything they do is financed by the academy. Professor Gu appears right next to Mingfei, telling him that this teacher is called Manyan and is a good friend of his. He also tells him that he is in charge of finances and ethics, so it is normal that he is a bit serious and stingy. Mingfei calls Yin bald professor while Professor Gu tries to convince him that he is alive, but the young man tells him that the blood on his chest confirms that he is dead. For this, Gu begins to explain that all that was just a simulation of real fire, since that was a day off at the academy. Students were free to act as they wish. Also shows him that the bullets used are small and powerful narcotic capsules which upon hitting the target break and evaporate quickly without hurting people. In between everything, he saw how the students were getting up and talking about the event, while Professor Yin was not as pleased as them and said that he would put an end to this activity. At that moment, Caesar arrived with Ziheng. Caesar told Professor Yin that the 3 special rules of the academy are based on: no alchemy equipment is allowed in the ice cellar, no injury or death will occur, and there will be no visits from outsiders outside the school. To that, Ziheng continued the idea by stating that injured people are because they accidentally fell, and accidental falls do not count as injuries, so they were not breaking any rules. Mingfei tells Professor Yin not to be depressed about it, but the director, still on the phone, tells Yin that he wants to make a special greeting to Lu Mingfei. He is astonished to hear that, and when Professor Yin asks his name and confirms that it is him, he hands him the phone to talk to the director. The principal asks Mingfei if he has taken his class, but he tells him that he hasn't had a chance to choose one yet. Then the principal tells him that he is glad to know that on his first day at the academy he managed to take down Caesar, and Ziheng is expected from an S-class rookie, and with that he said goodbye. Continuing with this, the principal is shown talking to a man in a room. This man was commenting to the principal that Freedom Day is getting warmer every year, and maybe it is time to take the reins on that, to which he received as an answer that he deliberately pleased his students. He asks Man C who was the man that was there if he remembered that defeat 8 years ago. Man C answers that at that time the Castle Academy with its exceptionally talented young students were disciplined as soldiers to be fully available in a battle, but the whole army was completely annihilated. To that, Man C replies that Caesar and Ziheng are truly unprecedented geniuses, but the boy Mingfei was too ordinary. The director affirms it but also clarifies that his S level is for a reason, but he just can't say it yet. Man C comments that the young man still doesn't have the self-confidence cultivated, and as a vision to a not-so-distant future he says that Mingfei will be crushed by Caesar and Ziheng. On the other hand, at the Castle Academy, Mingfei finally arrived at his dormitory, which was a double room. He was impressed with how beautiful the dormitory was, and also with his roommate, Finger, who welcomed him to dormitory number 303. Mingfei was walking with Finger, and Finger explains to him that the academy is divided into different fully equipped areas. First, he shows him the Lay-in Pavilion, and in the distance there is what they call the Spirit Room. He continues with the Amber Pavilion and the church. In the distance he sees an explosion in a building, but he tells Mingfei not to worry because that is the equipment department, which is full of crazy people who change weapons. At this point they pass by the clock tower, which tells that Professor Yin lives there with his father, who is called the Night Watchman because his words covered the entire academy. Finger shows Mingfei that passing through the first floor of the library you can reach the teaching area of the Spirit of Speech. He tells that in the whole academy that is the only place that is not at all affected by the commandments, and is the place where you can use the Spirit of Speech you handle. He adds to the explanation that the Spirit of Speech arises from the resonance between the dragon and the bloodline of the dragon, and usually this is issued by singing the text of the dragon, but also through body language. While Finger was explaining all this while walking, they saw many other people using their speech spirits. Then apparently someone who doesn't know how to handle it so well was creating a whale of water which was completely out of control, but another student arrived who froze it and made it break into hundreds of pieces. But when this happened, Mingfei looked at one of these pieces, and when he saw what should be his reflection, he saw himself but some time ago. Everything around him had turned totally black. In each of the fragments he saw different moments of his life, and when he tried to touch one of them, they all came together, and little by little everything was illuminated again. But from these fragments in front of him a tree was being formed, half of which was completely withered and the other half was in bloom. Professor Gu gives Mingfei a credential and tells him that tomorrow he has a 3E exam, which was the language of thieves, and asks him to take a seat because he wants to test his lineage by showing him a music box. Professor Gu begins to recite what seems to be a story, but Mingfei tells him that he doesn't understand what he is saying. Professor Gu tells him that he understands and that he shouldn't worry about it by setting the music box in motion. After a while, Professor Gu asks him if he felt something different, but Mingfei tells him that he only felt sleepy because of the music box. Then Professor Gu tries to find an explanation but realizes that something is making him run out of the room. Finger starts to write on the laptop what had happened, saying that it will be a great news for the academy. Finger notices that Mingfei sighs and asks if she is well, and Mingfei indirectly tells him that she doesn't want to go back and that she is worried about the exam. Finger proposes to cheat and Mingfei answers that how can they cheat. Cesar was giving a talk and Nuo tells Cesar about the news of Mingfei, who did not react to the spiritual words of the emperor. And this same information is received by Zihang in that the Professor Gu was running, and in call with the Professor Man he tells him that they have to meet in the library urgently to tell him something about Mingfei. Being in the library, the Professor Manny tells Gu that he cannot believe that he has to investigate again on this topic. Gu was opening an envelope that were the manuscripts of the Sea of Ice. Between Gu and Manny tells the story about the Black Emperor and the White Monarch. Gu tells that the rebellion of the White was the greatest story of the dragon, telling that the Black Emperor used the celestial copper to record the fate of the rebels and then stamped it on the scrolls of the Sea of Ice. And Manny said that the copper record detailed the Black Emperor's victory, but wondered if the White Emperor's spirit had been destroyed so easily, asking if perhaps Mangfei is the first case of having no reaction to the Emperor saying that they should investigate this case. Professor Gu was nervous and said that he doesn't want Mangfei to become a biological specimen. Then Manny told him that before finishing the 3E exam he won't tell anyone about it, and that if the higher-ups find out he will do his best to have Mangfei treated as a human. It had become dark and all the lights had been turned off, but a strange silhouette met Nauma secretly and asked him to make Mangfei pass the 3E exam, and Nauma accepted. The next day Mangfei arrived on time to take the exam and took a seat. Then the teacher explained the rules and started the exam. Then everyone present realized that the exam was blank, and Mangfei remembered what Finger had told him and what he had to do in this case. Then the teacher asked him to be quiet, putting a strange sound in the room and leaving the place. At that, Mangfei shows his left arm showing one of the symbols, saying that it will be simple, and begins to do the exam and realizes that everyone in the room had gone crazy. But at that he turns around realizing that a girl with amaryllis hair was quiet. Finished writing everything, Mangfei suffers a hallucination, appearing again the boy of his dream. He sits next to him saying his name, and the boy tells him his name was Lu Mingzi. Nings tells him that it is his spiritual vision and that he can see in the deepest part of his heart, saying that even if he hides something terrible in his heart, it is what he most desires, or something sad. At that, Mingfei asks him who he is, and Mings touches his chest saying that he has to ask him from here. At that, Nuo wakes up Mingfei telling him that he is brave to fall asleep in the exam, and tells him that the exam is over, but he saw the answer, telling him that he might get it right. After a while, Mingfei returns to the dormitory, which is greeted by Finger, who tells him that Nuo has posted the results on the Academy's network and congratulates him that he has passed. Somewhere in the sea, some divers were investigating the ruins of an old city to then invoke some snakes to investigate the whole area. In that, the head of the operation tell them to go up, that will see an earthquake, but it is too late, and are dragged down but manage to survive, and tell the boss that they believe they found the palace of the Emperor of Fire and Bronze. The head of the operation was talking to the director, explaining what happened with Yi Shang and Yajai in their exploration, and asks for authorization to use the key. The director tells him that he gave it to him at that time. The head of the operation enters a room where there was a lady with a baby to tell him that the director authorized him to use the key, giving the baby to the head of the operation. In that, the head prepares himself with the baby to go to help Yi Shang and Yajai. Arriving at the bottom, he meets Yi Shang and Yajai, telling them to get ready, that he will use the key, doing a ritual that shows the curse of Fire Eater. In that, opens the capsule where the baby was, approaching the baby to the statue, making the statue opens an entrance. In that, tells Yi Shang and Yajai that has 2 hours to remove the rest of the dragon, and gives him a device saying that if they cannot get it out, that they destroy it, withdrawing from the place. Yi Shang and Yajai enter the entrance, arriving at a large copper pillar. Yajai asks if it is a place of sacrifice, to which Yi Shang answers him not to see it from a human perspective because it does not belong to humans. Yi Shang tells him to take a picture of evidence and that he will go to where the snake was. Yi Shang leaves the place, and Yajai looks up to scan a branches that look weird and realizes that it is dragon language. Yajai's pulse rises, and when she is about to faint, Yi Shang arrives to hold her and asks if she is okay. Yajai answers that she was a little dizzy and asks if she found it, and Yi Shang answers yes, but it was very heavy and she had to destroy it. Yajai finds a statue, and as soon as she touches it, a strange figure grabs her from behind and asks Yi Shang for help, but Yi Shang, who was behind her, tells her that he was there, and Yajai realizes that what happened a moment ago was a hallucination and asks Yi Shang what was on her back. Yishang answers that it was something that the snake found that were remains of bone, and that begins to have a tremor and all the walls begin to move and decide to escape quickly from the place. Moving on to Mingfei, who is awakened by the sound of bells, and Mings tells him that it's the death knell. And Mingfei appears on top of the bell tower, and Mings asks him if the dream was real or what things were real, or if the real thing was a dream. Scared, Mingfei asks him what he wants, and Mings tells him that someone is about to die and asks him if he remembers the trick of the code of the games. Mingfei answers yes and asks him which one he chooses, and Mingfei answers Black Sheep Wall, and Mings tells him to use it and to be careful when using it. At that, Mingfei wakes up and Finger tells him to hurry up because the alarm is ringing, and at that they meet Nuo, and he tells Finger that the alarm is summoning the students from a rank upwards, and Finger leaves the place since he is F rank. At that time, all the students from a rank upwards arrive to the library and are received by a person with a mask explaining what happened with Yishang and Yijai, and that they must decipher the mechanism of the city, but they only have 20 minutes to decipher it. At that time, Mingfei passes his credence accessing now. Mingfei looks around and sees how everyone was trying their best to decipher the city. Mingfei remembers what happened a while ago with Mings, then introduces the words Black Sheep Wall and Nauma, causing a blackout. And when the light comes back, Nauma shows the escape route, and everything fixes his eyes on Mingfei, who had succeeded. Yishang and Yijai was dodging the debris of the city, and Yishang asks the operation chief to show the baby the map. The operation chief does so, making Yishang get him information of the way he has to go to be able to escape. At that, Yishang tells the operation chief that he is going to cut the connection with the snake, and they are on their way. Yishang tells Yijai to get ready, but she tells him that the oxygen is not going to be enough, and that she wants to stay with him there. At that moment, Yijai was going to tell him that she likes him, but Yishang interrupts her with a kiss, telling her that he is not going to let her die there. At that moment, the operation chief realizes that he miscalculated, and Yishang and Yijai are not going to be able to get out. Mingfei explains what happened with Yishang and Yijai, then Tang tells her not to worry, that everything will be fine, and tells her that she has to leave. Cutting the call, the operation chief was about to tell her to leave, giving up Yishang, and Yijai is lost. But Yijai appears with the remains that Yishang had found. But as soon as she hands it over, she is dragged to the bottom and a big blood stain appears. The chief of operation is upset for not being able to do anything. At that time, he sees that there was something that was moving in the water, and tells everyone to quickly take the bronze flask and then take revenge. At that time, everyone prepares to attack the dragon. At that time, the chief of operation prepares to shoot at the dragon, shooting several times, but it seems that the dragon does not hurt. At that time, they release some bombs from the ship, causing the dragon to eat it to explode the bombs inside. The head of the operation tells Surma that he will give the maximum score, but in that is pierced by the dragon, killing her. The dragon turns around the ship, pointed with his mouth, waiting to detonate the bombs that remained inside, and the head of the operation tells him not to detonate the bombs because the dragon is playing with them. In that, they tell the head of the operation that are near the dam of the hill Q, and the professor gives the order to advance in a straight line at maximum power. The ship begins to escape, and the dragon begins to chase him. In that, they arrive at the dam and use the key to open the gate of the dam. Passing through this, the head of the operation asks to detonate the remaining bomb, exploding the mouth of the dragon to then be decapitated by the gate. But the head of the operation had been pierced by one of the teeth of the dragon. Returning to the library, the director Anju explains to everyone that the ship was safe and thanks Mingfei, who was the one who contributed the most, and everyone starts to applaud Mingfei. Outside the library, Zihang asks Mingfei to join his club if he wants, and that Cesar will surely ask the same, but he will be happy to have him as an opponent or friend. Then the bell begins to ring, and Zihang tells him that the academy is in mourning. In the ship, the head of the operation says his last words to the director, telling him not to tell the students what happened in the operation, and believes he has killed one of the minions of the Dragon King. And then the head of the operation loses his life at that very moment. Mingfei had arrived with Finger to an event that had been invited by Cesar. Nuo arrives where the two were and tells him to hurry to enter, because if they wet the rented clothes, they will have to pay for it. Being inside the mansion, there were many people dressed elegantly enjoying the event. A butler rings a bell to call attention and tells everyone to get ready, that the dance is about to begin, to welcome Cesar, who comes down the stairs with Nuo. When he is downstairs, he tells everyone to say happy birthday to Nuo, and all the people present wish him happy birthday to start the dance. Then Finger starts to dance with Mingfei. Nuo talks to Cesar, who already knew that he wanted to invite Mingfei to the club, and Cesar tells him that he doesn't like others to know what he thinks. Then he stops the dance to say a few words and starts to give motivating words about those who are there. They must fight. They are the best, and only the best can go to war, making everyone in the room start to shout his name. Then Cesar calls Mingfei to stand next to him. But if he refuses, the door is there and he has a dance to think about it. Finger pushes Mingfei to accept and starts to dance with Mingfei. The girl tells him that her name is Zero. Zero, while dancing with Mingfei, helps him to improve his steps until he finishes the music. Everything in the room applauds them for the dance and Zero leaves the place. Mingfei goes outside and meets Nu. Nu tells Mingfei to drive to the top of the mountain. The academy is attacked by a group of people on motorcycles. The teachers discuss what was happening and realize that it was because of the bone jar. Naoma tells the teachers that he sent Sessa's club to protect the spirit room and Zihang's club to protect the library. Then all the students get ready with weapons and tranquilizer bullets to protect the academy. On the mountain, Mingfei, while driving, notices that Nu has fallen asleep, so he takes his eyes off her for a moment to see her again, seeing Ming's in her place. Ming's asks Mingfei if he wants her help to conquer Nu, but Mingfei tells her to go away and bring Nu back. At that, Ming's reminds him of all the love advice Nu gave him and then touches his head and unlocks a new trick, which is show me the flowers. Nu reappears next to Mingfei having reached the top of the mountain. Nu tells Mingfei to walk for a while. Back at the academy, the students had managed to capture 7 of the intruders. Teacher Manny mentions that there are still 6 of them hiding somewhere in the academy and asks Naoma to do his best to find them. At that moment, a person dressed as a cowboy answers a call from the director Anju. Anju tells him that he found the bones of the Dragon King Norton and then asks him to lift the commandments. The guy asks him if he was serious and Anju answers yes because he wants the students to gain experience. The guy tells him that he will think about it. At that time, he receives a call from Manny, who is his son, but without engaging in much conversation, Manny knows that his father is going to lift the commandment. At that time, Manny's father proceeds to lift the commandment. Mingfei was talking to Nu. Nu sits down in a pond and then invites her to sit next to her. Mingfei accepts to pass the time. They both talk about the death of Yi Sheng and Yajai, who had sacrificed himself in the operation. Nu tells her that Mance, who was the head of the operation, had also died, who was also Nu's tutor. Mingfei asks her if she is afraid, to which she answers that she would surely do the same as Mance did to avoid announcing his death. Returning to the academy, Naoma informs everyone that the watchman had deactivated the commandments and that the invaders used their power to move to another place, to what his captain tells him that they are going to go to the spiritual room. Manny begins to invoke the snake of the true void to check throughout the academy to find the intruders, in that one of the intruders uses his phone dialing his captain, who tells him that his goal is the cellar. The intruder had arrived at the cellar, entering through the chimney. Moving inside the cellar, he finds a door, and just at that moment his captain calls him to tell him to use the black card he gave him to enter the underground to go to the Shikodai district. The intruder does as he asks, entering through the door. With Cesar's group, Cesar calls Zihang asking if he wants to bet something since he had arrived his guests. In that, Zihang tells him if it was necessary, then Cesar answers him that he is right, and that each one does his job. Being with Zihang's group, Naoma gives them the order to withdraw from the library. Zihang asks Su Kaiyan to give the order to the whole group. She obeys, but Zihang says that this order does not include him. Kaiyan finds this strange, but then they receive another information to tell everything that Zihang is not included in the order. Returning with the intruders, one of the intruders asks his captain if his domain made him completely invisible. The captain answers yes, but asks him why the person in front of him was smiling at him. But at that moment they are discovered. The captain gives the order to disperse to get in defensive position, but Cesar and the captain of the intruders asks them not to do anything. The captain thanks him, answering the call furious, saying not to bother her, hanging up the call. The captain begins to talk with Cesar, saying that she is a nice person. Cesar asks for her name, and the girl answers that her name is Mai Sakatoku, in that she grabs her phone to tell him that when the music finishes she is going to start the fight. Cesar asks her why they came, then Mai answers that they come for the bone jar, in that the music ends and a shooting starts. Cesar and Mai stand up. Cesar realizes that the enemy is using tranquilizer bullets, in that Cesar asks Naoma to put a 5 seconds timer. When the timer reaches 0, Mai activates his domain. Zihang hears that someone knocks on the door and says to come in. At that, a girl enters saying that she is his opponent. At that, Zihang activates his domain, which was King's Flames, burning everything around him. But at that, the girl also activates her domain, which was also King's Flames. At that time, the intruder who had entered the cellar had reached the basement, and at that time Naoma appears. The intruder is surprised and then asked who he was. Naoma replied that his name was Eva. Eva tells him that he cannot do anything but warns him that it is best to get out of there. At that time, the intruder asks him how to get to the district Shikuda. Eva gives him directions to get there. The intruder thanks her and then leaves. In that moment he receives another call, but when he was about to receive the last directions he falls into the water and loses the phone, leaving him no choice but to do it himself. Swimming he finds another door, but when he is about to open it he doubts whether to do it but unintentionally ends up opening it. Going back to Mingfei and Nu tells her seriously to join the student club, but then she tells her that this is not what Cesar meant, and that she is the one who is inviting him. She tells him that Cesar will be her brother, she will be his brother too, and they will take good care of him. At that, Mingfei tells her that she didn't come to rescue him at the dance. Nu answers that she was going to do it, but Cesar didn't let her. At that, Nu says that she is waiting for a gift from a person, and that she has been waiting for this day year after year. Nu says she wants flowers. Then Mingfei whispers the words, "Give me flowers." Then the car starts to play music and fireworks appear. Then Mingfei and Nu enjoy the fireworks, and in the sky appears the words "Happy Birthday." Nu says it doesn't matter if it's not for her and then shouts "Happy birthday to me." Returning to the intruder, who had been dragged by a current of water and found a shark. The intruder tells the shark that he is not going to let himself be eaten, but the shark leaves the place. At that, the intruder uses a hook to get out of the water to explore the place looking for an institute of Walter Elheim. The director was locked in the bone jar, saying that they could never investigate the Dragon King, but today is a historic day because they captured the Dragon King Norton. Those who were present begin to applaud and the director begins to give a few words. From afar the intruder was watching it. That the director asks Nauma the results of the MRI, showing those present that in the jar there were 2 cavities but one was empty. One of the scientists of the place tells him that the best thing was to dissect as soon as possible, but the director mentions that they don't have the right tools to cut the recycled metal. At that, the director threatens the scientists to get out of there. At that, the intruder takes the opportunity to steal the flask, approaching, but when he was taking a picture he was having hallucinations, scaring the intruder. The intruder thinks better to do it and decides better to escape from the place. At that, an unknown person arrives to proceed to open the flask to pour his blood and welcome Constantine. In that, Mai was fighting against Cesar. Cesar blocks all the attacks that Mai was throwing at him, saying that Mai was using ninja technique, and that Cesar tells him that they better finish fast and tells him that if with 3 blades he can get to kill him. Mia tells him not to be afraid because men like him has mercy. Mia starts her attack, giving the first blade but is blocked by Cesar. Then Mia starts to move faster, creating a clone, giving the second and third blade but is dodged by Cesar. Then Cesar concentrates all his senses to wait for Mia's attack, being completely covered by several blades, but manages to move and block Mia's attack, surprising him. Mia points a gun at him, saying that the winner does not need to talk much, but a strong explosion interrupts their fight. Cesar tells him that they are even and Mia answers that it will be a draw. Cesar finds a trace of fire. Mia tells him that the wall burned in an instant, saying that to burn so fast its temperature had to be the same as the sun. Cesar realizes that the person came from the laboratory, but it is strange not to have heard his heartbeat. At that moment, Nu thinks it is strange that the car has been repaired without any explanation to tell Mingfei to go back to the academy. Returning to the academy, Nu receives a message saying that the academy is under attack. Mingfei is worried, but Nu tells her that the academy has spent years fighting dragons and that they will be fine, and that by the time they get to the academy the battle will surely be over. Returning to the academy, a high-speed battle was taking place against Zihang and the yellow-haired girl. The two were evenly matched in the fight. Then the intruder who had escaped from stealing the flask was running away and was shot by several students to stop him. But when he was about to escape he was run over by Mingfei. Then Mingfei went to help him but realized it was Tang, and the two began to greet each other. Mingfei asks him what he was doing there, so Tang answers that he was there for a job that he had been given. Mingfei lets himself be held hostage by Tang and gets into the car, but then he feels a strong heat. Tang asks Nu what was happening, but Nu answers him to look in the rearview mirror and see a girl who was saying "Jeej," scaring Mingfei and Tang. Mingfei steps on the accelerator and leaves the girl behind. At that moment the teachers were watching and gave the order to shoot with real bullets because it was a dragon. The whole academy began to attack the dragon with everything they had, but nothing they did was effective. At that moment the dragon invoked the king's flames, causing a big explosion. At that moment Zihang and the girl with whom he was fighting stopped their fight when they heard the explosion. At that moment he informed Zihang about what was happening with the dragon. At that moment the girl left the place without telling him that they didn't plan this. At that moment Mia was talking to her partner and explained everything that was happening, sending her proof. Her partner told her that her power was unstable, meaning that her body would not last long. collapsing at any moment, and if it collapsed she would release a storm with enough power to destroy the whole mountain where they were. At that moment Nu, Mingfei and Tang were hiding. Tang asks if the dragon could detect him, but Nu says that the dragons have the 5 senses sharpened, but he thinks it is strange that the dragon has not found him. At that moment Finger appears, scaring Mingfei. Finger scolds Mingfei for leaving him alone. At that moment they realize that the dragon was going to where they were. Finger says that he must go to a place with water, so Nu proposes to go to the pool. They meet Mia and Cesar, then Mingfei, Finger and Tang go to the pool, but Nu stays with Cesar to talk to him. Cesar asks Nu to protect Mingfei. Nu asks him if he thinks that the dragon was chasing Mingfei, but he answers that he wasn't sure. Nu proceeds to leave the place to go to where Mingfei was. At that moment Mia receives a call from her partner who tells her that the metal can't harm him, but to attack him the anesthesia bullets are more effective than the real ones. Mia asks if the anesthesia will be effective, but her partner answers her that no, because the liquid evaporates as soon as it gets close, but the kinetic damage can stop it for a while. At that moment Cesar and Mia start to shoot with anesthesia bullets, stopping the dragon. The teachers see this and give the order to use anesthesia bullets, returning to Mingfei. Tang feels that the dragon is approaching, so Finger proposes to dive and that the 3 of them dive, but Mingfei can't hold his breath getting out but realizes that everything was red. He tries to get to the shore but realizes that he was not in the pool, so he thinks that it is a hallucination created by Mings and that he tries to look for Mings, but he finds that he is with the dragon. The dragon approaches Mingfei and begins to smell him. Mingfei thinks that he recognizes people by their smell. At that Mingfei fixes his sight upwards, realizing that he was in the Bronze City. At that he realizes that the girl who was there was the dragon. At that Mings appears kicking the dragon. At that Mingfei returns to the pool thinking that he had already woken up, but he doesn't see Finger or Tang anywhere. At that the director arrives and tells him to follow him. At that the director and Mingfei arrives at a high tower, telling him that the whole academy was holding the dragon, and that he takes out a rifle at the same time as a bullet, saying that it is a special bullet, being one of the few weapons that can kill a dragon, telling him that he is going to shoot it. Mingfei asks him why, then the director tells him that he is one of the few people who is not affected by his dominion. At that the director leaves the place. At that the dragon loses its human form, turning completely into a dragon. At that the director arrives, saying that he is going to take care of it. At that he goes running towards the dragon. The dragon was about to attack the director, but the director activates his domain, slowing down the time, and that the director attacks him in the eye, making him open it. Then Mingfei shoots him, hitting the target. The director gives the order to use real bullets, and that Tang tries to escape but is stopped by the dragon that just stares at him while he is shot by all the students, and that Tang escapes from the place to be finished by all the students. Tang was running through the forest while having visions of the dragon talking to a person, and that Tang falls to the ground by the pain of the visions, but when he stops he gets up and gets almost the same appearance of the person who was talking to the dragon in his visions, and then pulls out wings of fire. In that the director was talking to the father of Manny and claims to him that he could have had the opportunity to kill the dragon Norton, but he did not do it, meaning that his brother is going to take revenge on the humans. The director tells Manny's father that he was tired of hunting dragons and himself, saying that thanks to the dragon blood he has been able to live more than 100 years, but that he has no friends left besides him and that they should have died long ago. Manny's father tells him that he understands, but that a leader that can protect the world has not appeared yet. The director says that Manny's father has already appeared and asks him if it was Mingfei. The director tells him that he has faith in him, wishing that he will be the sword that will finish with all the dragons, and that he wants to give the last of his life to end the war, saying that he wants to kill the 4 kings. Then he tells him that the reason why this happens is because each dragon king on the resurrection day cuts a part of his body that keeps him having the complete gene, but that the only way to kill the Dragon King is just before he makes the bone jar. Then Manny's father asks him why he did not kill Norton, and the director answers him that he needs his bones, and that if he needs to push Norton to the limit to achieve it, he will do it. The next day Mingfei was checking his phone and Finger asked him what club he was going to join, so Mingfei said he was going to join the student club. Then Finger told him he was also in the student club. Then there was a knock on the door and Mingfei went to open it. Then he saw a man with white hair who gave him his student club card and told him they had a meeting at the Amber Pavilion. In that moment Cesar and the director were talking, saying that he saw his performance in the battle. The director tells him to go and gather the best of his club for an expedition. Being in the Amber Pavilion, Cesar tells Mingfei to get ready because they are going to go on an expedition trip to the country of Xin. In that Mingfei tries to convince Cesar that he will only be a burden for the expedition, but Cesar does not listen to him, saying his reason why he thinks he will be useful in the expedition. In that Finger tells him that he must behave to be of rank S since other students accepted. In that Zero arrives, saying that he accepted without any problem. Mingfei asks him if he thought about it since he could die, but she answers him that they are there to protect humanity. At that, Mingfei tells him that he only came for the scholarship. At that, Cesar stands up and tells Mingfei that he is surprised but disappointed at the same time. Then he asks him why he didn't leave the academy to be able to live his old life, so he tells him to leave his credential. But then Nu arrives defending Mingfei. Nu tells Mingfei that whether he stays or not is your decision. Then Nu reminds him that she will always support him. Then Mingfei tells him that if he becomes a burden, then he shouldn't be blamed. Several days had passed since Mingfei was trained to prepare for the expedition. Mingfei was looking at herself in the mirror, and then she started to talk to Finger about whether Nu had some kind of relationship with Cesar, and then Mingfei asked him why he had been attending after having repeated several times. Then Finger answers him that it is because of the food, and Mingfei gets upset saying that he may die in some mission. Then Finger slaps Mingfei saying that you understand him because he is afraid of dying. Mingfei accepts it. Then Finger tells him not to worry because he will always be there for him from far away. At that, Mingfei gives his card to Finger. Finger is surprised of the credit on the card. Then Mingfei tells him that if he doesn't come back, he can use the card. Then Mingfei starts to say many sad and depressing things of if he doesn't come back, but Finger ignores him to order food on the phone. Mingfei gets upset saying use the card when he dies, but he may be lucky to survive. At that, Finger gives him back the card saying scrap wood, luck is the best. Mingfei asks him if he was encouraging him. Then Finger replies that they warm up each other. Past that the bronze operation was kicking off. Professor Manyi tells him that from now on they will not be considered as students but as a trusted interim commissioner, and the only reason why they are on this ship is because they are the best. Mingfei wonders where Ziheng was, but if he was there that was a burden. Professor Manyi says that the ship was improved to fight creatures. In that, Cesar asks him if there is a possibility of meeting a dragon. Manyi answers that it could be the guardian that guards the Bronze City, and that he explains that in the operation the submarine team is going to take a special bomb to the Bronze City to make it explode. After a while, Mingfei and Nu were descending towards the Bronze City when they met a statue. Professor Manyi told him to pour blood from the key. Nu told Mingfei to do it, but the statue bit him, scaring Mingfei. Nu healed Mingfei's wounds. Then the door to the Bronze City was open, causing Mingfei and Nu to fall into it. Nu wakes up in a cave where he meets Mingfei. Nu decides to open his helmet to save oxygen, so Mingfei does the same. Nu thinks it's strange that there hasn't been an exchange of gases, but Naoma explains to him that it could be that his master Norton has returned, activating the city. Nu and Mingfei begin to explore the cave, finding several statues along the way. Nu asks where they are going to leave the bomb or if they should leave it in the Dragon King's room. Manyi says that it is the safest thing to do. Then he asks Mingfei to pour some of the dye he took and that it will guide him to the Dragon King's room. Then Nu and Mingfei begin to follow the trail of ink quickly. Then they reach the tree where Yisheng and Yajai were. But they don't stop to think about it too much. They stop, but then they find a giant statue. Mingfei says that they should leave the bomb there, but Nu tells him to put down his oxygen mask and turn around. As soon as Mingfei turns around, he is kicked by Nu saying that the Dragon King's room must be nearby. Mingfei notices that the corpses have traces of burns. Nu asks Mingfei to give him his hand. Mingfei gives it to him and Nu removes the bandage to use his blood to open the door. But then there is a tornado of water that causes the wires to be cut. Then Cesar and Manyi use their dominion. Then Mingfei and Nu arrive to what looks like a small forest. Walking for a while, he finds a house. Nu opens the door but finds no one. Then Nu starts to investigate the house. Then a vision comes to him and then he asks Mingfei to sit at the table. At that moment, Nu tries to imitate the events of the people who were sitting there at the time. At that moment, Norton is shown talking to Constantine saying that there is in this world that can hurt him. At that moment, Constantine tells him that sooner or later he has to come back home, that he wants to come back together with him. At that moment, a voice scares Mingfei. At that moment, Nu falls tired explaining what she saw and how Constantine and Norton were very close to each other. Nu says she is sure that this place was the bedroom of the Dragon King. Then they leave the bomb with 45 minutes to escape. Then they go running to escape from the place. They return to the cemetery, but they don't find the rope. Then debris begins to fall from the Bronze City and Nu says that surely someone activated the self-destruction. Then they return to where she was, realizing that the whole place was collapsing. Mingfei thinks that the same thing happened to Yan Sheng and Yan Jai, meaning that they should take the same route as the two of them. Then they dive underwater and find another statue similar to the one used to open the entrance door. Returning to the ship, 15 minutes had passed since the connection was lost. Caesar tells Manyi to go down, but he tells him that surely the Dragon King had woken up, saying that they could do nothing but wait. At that, Nu and Mingfei were escaping. Nu says that only a miracle can happen to find the way. Then Mingfei shouts map completely open, managing to communicate with Finger telling him to hurry. Manyi begins to have a strong headache, saying that a strong signal was coming. In that, Mingfei tells Finger to hurry. Finger tells him to wait for him, that because of his rank it is more complicated to do so, and that Finger hacks the system, having promotion to rank S, to tell Eva that he trusts her. Finger begins to give the indications to Mingfei, being followed by Nu, swimming at maximum speed, and that the boat arrives to them an information that the temperature of the water was rising, but Manny by using his domain could not command in the bank. Then Cesar takes the command. He begins to tell the crew everything they have to do, but then the ship is attacked by the Dragon King, destroying the torpedo cabin. Then Caesar gives the order to escape from there, starting a chase. Then Zero says that those who were following him were not the Dragon King, and then he points out from afar a silhouette that was Norton. At that moment, Nordo throws himself into the ocean and the ship stops in its tracks. Then the dragon approaches Norton, thanking him for all his work, and then hits the head of the dragon, causing a big explosion in the place. At that moment it is shown that Norton had combined with the dragon. At that, Nu and Mingfei continue to escape. Finger tells him the location of the exit so that they hurry, they have little time. At that they find the body of Yishen, who had an object of high value. Nu places the object on his back and they proceed to continue escaping from the place. At that they find the doorman of the exit. Mingfei tries to use the blood on his finger, but it had dried up. Nu tries to hold the pit that was about to fall on him. Then Mingfei tries to cut his finger with the knife, but he can't because of the water. Mingfei gets brave and opens his oxygen mask and uses his teeth to cut his finger. He succeeds in doing so and spills his blood on the doorman, opening the door. At that, Cesar gives the order to return to the location of the Bronze City, but they are chased by Norton. At that, Cesar says that he has a way to take care of the Dragon King. At that, Nu wakes up Mingfei with a blow, saying that his suit was very damaged and he had to use the mask to share oxygen. At that moment he tells her that he is going to give her his suit so that she can endure the pressure of the place, taking advantage that she had practiced diving before. Returning to the ship, they had let a diving bell loose, but they say that this is going to affect the speed of the ship. At that moment Ziheng arrives, saying that he is going to help them to hunt the Dragon King. At that, Mingfei had put on Nu's suit. Nu, signaling to Mingfei, tells her the place where they have to escape. Then Mingfei follows her, but just happens an explosion, taking out Poison, making Mingfei wonder if Nu is going to be okay. Returning to the ship, the officer says that another engine of the ship is badly damaged. At that, Cesar tells him to hit the Dragon King with a warhead containing a supercavitation generator, making this not be held back by water, traveling at the speed of an airplane. Zero says that instead of using the explosion they are going to pierce the Dragon King, but the officer tells him that the Dragon King moves as agile as a fish to hit him. Zero says that at about 100 meters distance it can be enough to hit the Dragon King. Cesar goes outside to start the plan, but at that the Dragon King stops. Then Cesar comments that he surely sensed the danger. At that moment Cesar covers his eyes and uses his dominance, starting to shoot Norton to provoke him so he doesn't escape. At that moment Zero informs that he had arrived to the torpedo room, but it was very hot. The officer tells him that there is a risk that it could explode, but Zero takes the risk. At that moment the officer tells Cesar that the preparations were ready. Then Cesar gives the order to go at maximum speed against Norton. At that moment Norton was about to dive, but Ziheng arrives to distract Norton. Activating his King Flames, he attacks Norton, and Norton responds with a similar attack, causing an explosion. At that moment everyone is blinded, but as Cesar had covered his eyes he can see clearly. At that moment Cesar gives the order to launch the torpedoes. Then Zero launches the torpedoes, but is hit by an explosion. The torpedo goes out in Norton's direction, hitting him in the stomach, taking Norton to fly away. Ziheng informs that he does not hear vital signs and that he leaves the place since the helicopter had received a lot of damage. At that moment Zero arrives with Cesar. Zero asks him how he was, then he answers that he was fine and asks Zero the same question, saying that he will need a surgical operation. Then Zero asks him with a hand signal if his ears were fine. Then Cesar answers with a hand signal, asking for forgiveness for not having followed his recommendations. Nu and Mingfei manage to see the diving bell, and Nu opens the bell and puts Mingfei inside, but she is attacked by the Dragon King and is pierced, but she hurries to close the diving bell. Mingfei was in shock and starts to scream for her not to die while tears flowed from her eyes. At that, Mingfei appears on a raft, so Mings tells him that it's no use shouting, and then tells him not to be surprised since he was there because he is about to die. Then Mingfei lies down and Mings asks him what he was doing. Mingfei answers that he is resting to recover energy since he had things to do. At that, Mings tells him that it's no use. Nu had been pierced, losing 90% of his blood. He was trapped in a submarine facing the Dragon King himself, saying that he was basically dead to tell him that being here time passes slower. Minj asks him if he has any dream, but Mingfei answers that even if he had one, it is not his problem. Minj tells him that if he answers, maybe he will be able to kill Dragon. Mingfei accepts and begins to answer his questions and begins to have a reflection with Minj about existentialism and why he was alive and how lonely he felt until he met Nu. Something had changed and he felt different. Minj continues chatting with Mingfei and decides to make a deal with him. He tells him that he can finish with the Dragon King, but it won't be easy, but with the condition that he will have 4 invocations, and when all his wishes come true, his life will be completely his. Mingfei accepts the conditions and makes the pact with Minj, touching his head, giving him infinite mana. Minj explains to him that he also has another ability that he unlocked, which is Don't Die, with which he can bring Nu back to life. Then Minj kicks Mingfei back to the diving bell. Mingfei opens his eyes and goes to look for Nu, using his ability to revive her and breaking the Dragon King's tail. Mingfei claims to Minj that the skills he gave him are not attack skills, but Minj replies that the box he has in his hand that had been grabbed by Ziheng contains powerful weapons, which are the 7 deadly sins. Minj recommends him to use the sin of anger, taking advantage that Nordo had a lot of anger inside. Mingfei opens the box, releasing the weapons, but the sin of anger doesn't appear, but Minj tells him that with what he has he can fix it. In that moment, Mingfei uses the sin of gluttony, hitting Norton, making the weapon to activate. At that moment he grabs another weapon and manages to cut his mouth. Minj tells him that he doesn't have much grip in the water. He gives him one last thing and wishes him luck. Mingfei starts to attack Norton, hitting him in the short and hitting several parts of his body, but Norton hits Mingfei, throwing him away. Mingfei and Norton start a collision of blows, being at par. At that moment Mingfei uses Cesar's ability to find Norton. He concentrates on finding Norton's position, and at that moment Mingfei and Norton attack each other, and moving at high speed, Mingfei manages to stay in front of Norton, but he realizes that it was Tang and he can't give the last attack, being strangled by him, and Minj has no other choice but to help and force Mingfei to kill Norton. At that moment Mingfei, crying, apologizes to Tang, telling him that he did not want to do it. While on the surface, a girl sees Norton escaping and takes the opportunity to give him the coup de grace, notifying him that Mingfei had survived and Norton was dead. Mingfei asked the headmaster why they kept the subject of the dragons hidden. The headmaster told him that it was complicated, but basically he didn't want to destroy people's beliefs. Mingfei reads the letter and says that he had received Mingfei's grades and is happy about it. He apologizes for not having time for him and for being an incompetent mother, but tells him that when he turns 22 years old he promises that she and his father will make time to be with him. Mingfei starts to cry while reading the letter. The director tells her one last thing, which was that she had to keep all the details of the operation secret. At that, Mingfei arrives with Finger and, annoyed, tells him why he made an article of him and why Cesar's was more striking. At that, someone knocks on the door. Mingfei goes to open it and is surprised that it is Cesar, and tells him that he heard everything from the other room. At that, Finger delivers sugar to Cesar, making him leave. Mingfei and Finger wonders what Cesar was doing living there, and not only that, he was cooking with Ziheng. At that, Nu arrives to talk to Mingfei, thanking him for everything he did and that if it wasn't for him she would have died. At that, Nu asks him if he is going to eat pizza with them, but Mingfei tells him that he has to finish the rehearsal first. At that moment, a person gives her a package. Mingfei enters the room, and when she opens the package she finds a phone. Checking the message she had, it was from Minj, telling her to use the phone to communicate, and with what happened she is going to take a quarter of her life. At that moment Mingfei says that she will do her best not to depend on Minj again.